probably know him.
Jim was, we all were back in Bernie's days. We were part of his early administration.
evening.
Jim was the first clerk under Bernie
Oh.
in 1981. I was an assistant.
Reboot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I think Jim needs you to pipe in.
Any problems?
Test, Jim, test. Test. Good.
I hope so. Can you hear me? Is this good enough? Okay.
Hello?
Testing, testing,
You need to be a little closer.
testing, testing.
Yeah, just bring the mic, bring the mic over where it shows up.
Okay.
Hello, hello?
Thank you all. I'm turning the sound back down.
Okay. Yeah, so we're just waiting for technical.
Tell us a story, Shereen.
I've got nothing.
Is Christine able to make it?
She had to be at another meeting statewide.
Sure. Priorities.
You at the council meeting last night?
No, I wasn't. What? Go to the fighter jets, huh? Yeah.
Debacle.
I mean, I can take notes for a minute. It's, okay, it's opening.
You're good?
Yeah, just 30 seconds, but you can keep going. I'll catch up.
Okay, so we're going to call to order this meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners, March 27th. Are there any additions or modifications for the agenda tonight? No? Okay. Public forum, is there anyone here wishing to speak for public forum?
Yes.
Okay. If you want to come up to the microphone.
Sure.
And we'll just ask you to say your name. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Ebony Nyoni. I don't know, do I say it in here?
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm here today because recently I was part of a public election process, and I had some really bad media happen to me, in which Christine Longmore made a few comments underneath the media saying that I don't represent 90% of the black community. And why I came, and unfortunately she's not here, is because I wanted to ask if she thinks she represents 90% of the black community. And if there's anyone who represents, and there's millions of us in the U.S., 90% of the black community. I thought as a representative that was an extremely inappropriate comment to make, as someone who is supposed to at least be a voice for others. And I would like to see that something is done. I would like an apology, and I would like to see where her head was at with that. I've literally only spoken to her in life a few times, so I don't know how she can make such claims. And again, it's unfortunate that she's not here, but I did see a piece that she sent out to the Racial Justice Coalition, charging that, some groups were, not me, but other groups were saying that she had, what they were saying was defamation of character, was demonizing, and it was strange. It was strange because that's the very thing that she signed on to regarding her own people group, regarding a black woman. So I want her to be able to be accountable as we're all growing in the public atmosphere and in the private atmosphere.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment?
Thank you, Ebony.
Okay, Chief's report.
Sure. So, first, so that she can go home because she's been waiting. I'd like to introduce. I don't know if you want to. You can speak right from there. But this is Kayla Donahue. She is a full-time opioid data analyst. She is under the auspices of the Chittenden County Opioid Alliance, but she works here in the Burlington Police Department. And as far as her work priorities, it's sort of like half and half between the overall needs of the Alliance, of which we're a part, and then the needs of the Burlington Police Department. So when we talk about having a data-driven approach to the opioid crisis, you're looking at literally the face of it. So, and Ebony, do you want me to reach out to you in a bit, just to? You wanted me to reach out to you about this by way of follow-up? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, thank you.
Just before Ebony left. So go ahead, take it away, Kayla.
Hi, do you want me to go there? I don't know. Okay, wonderful. So I'm Kayla Donahue. I'm a trained epidemiologist. I have a master's in public health from Boston University. Most recently, I was working at the Vermont Department of Health as an infectious disease epidemiologist. So, okay, go over there. Sorry. So I guess I'm just really excited to be here and working on this project and learning more about the opioid crisis. Happy to be working with the police department and exploring some police data. It can be really useful, I think, in combating some of this public health work and public safety work that we're doing together. And here's a resource if people have questions or want to look at different data outcomes. Happy to do my best and be here for the community.
Thanks. Yeah, I think one of the things we're seeing is that when we started this initiative over 2 years ago, I was just saying this to Kayla today, we had no database. I mean, we knew at the end of the year, we knew how many people had died. That was pretty much the extent of our understanding. And I know the Department of Health had a repository of data that the average layperson didn't know where to find, and police departments didn't know how to make sense of. But now I think with Sam, the prior analyst, we got a very, very solid foundation. And now Kayla comes in. Sam had more general quantitative training. Kayla has specific training in epidemiology and biostatistics. So we're trying to always, with each iteration, bring it to the next level. So that's where we're at. And I just wanted you to meet our new employee. So
Welcome.
Welcome aboard.
hey, go ahead.
Thank you.
What kind of data specific types of data are you going to be?
Take it away, Kayla.
All right. So I think historically we've been looking at a lot of kind of trends over time. So we've been looking at crime rates like related to opioid use. So some of those include like increased retail theft, burglary, prostitution, things along those lines. So we've been looking at those and comparing them to opioid-related crimes like drug possession or overdose. We have data from the hospital. They share the emergency department encounters. So we have those numbers, and then we also have their disposition, so where they're going when they leave the emergency department. We have some data from the hubs, or the Chittenden County hub rather, and the spokes in the area. So we have data on how many people are requesting services, how long it's taking them to get services, things like that. And then we have the siren data that the health department shares with us, which is from the emergency medical responders. So it's the EMS database. So it's how many overdoses and naloxone distributions were given by EMS across the state, and then for Chittenden County. So we're working on getting some more. Oh, and then of course the police data, which, oh wait, I mentioned that, sorry. This has been a long day. So, working on kind of coordinating all the data that we have access to, seeing if there's any gaps and new data that we need, and then hopefully doing some more kind of studies. So we have like our Substat group that meets. Are you familiar with all that? Perfect. So kind of seeing if we can delve more into that and try to predict who's going to end up in the Substat group before they're there. Try to be a little more proactive about who we're reaching out to. Maybe even following those individuals and back tracing to see where good intervention points could have been. And, trying to do that for the new generations coming into this. So a lot of projects. Talked about even looking at how this is impacting first responders and police. So how showing up at an overdose scene is going to influence the individual. Looking at some of the clinical data with the clinician here for the first responders. Things along those lines are some initial projects we talked about, but I'm sure, just jumping into it, so there'll be more to come.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, and by way of invite, maybe Laura can remind me, or we'll do it on an email blast. But you're always welcome to come to the community stat meetings. If you haven't been to one yet, I think it's pretty interesting. Maybe you can play hooky from work or school or home life. It's this Thursday from 8:30 to 11. Is that right? 2.5 hours. 8:30 to 11 at Contois. It's with some exceptions, it's every last Thursday of the month. And it is not open to the press because we have very candid meetings that involve like agencies accounting for some of the decisions they make, including our own. But it is open to community like leaders, so to speak, and stakeholders, which is the police commission for sure. So if you want to, I'll remind you, you'll remind me, but we can just blast out and invite to them. And if you can't make it this month, because it's in 3 days, you can always come to any of these, and I think it would be helpful to see. Our work in community stat on the opioid crisis was recently noticed by the Vera Institute of Justice. It's a criminal justice reform group that just looks at innovative ways of doing policing. It's based out of New York City, but it's got offices in other places in the country. They sent up a film crew and a reporter. They're writing a 3,000-word feature on our work. They interviewed Kayla at length. It's basically about Kayla. Kayla, Jackie, they interviewed the mayor, myself, Tom Dalton at Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform, Grace at the Needle Exchange. So our work is, I think at the end of the day, as a reality check, are we down or up for opioid deaths?
We're up.
We're up.
From 2016 to 2017.
Again, it's up. We're up statewide and we're up countywide a lot, percentage-wise. So the unobserved hypothetical is, would it have been worse? But we're trying everything we can, and we're trying alternatives. We're not just running around with handcuffs, although handcuffs do have a place. I think we're also really, really coming to see, and Kayla can pick up on this as well, that what's become clear, we've been down to, like I mentioned, down to Johns Hopkins and UPenn and John Jay in New York and talking, the Center for Naval Analyses. So there's a lot of like talking heads, but I think what's become clear is the evidence shows that that the medicine that replaces opioids in your nervous system, so to speak, is what's really effective at reducing overdoses and reducing opioid dependence. So that means buprenorphine, Suboxone, methadone. Anything's become really, really clear to us. People have known it since 2012. We were just looking at research today. Like the studies are 6, 7, 8 years old. We're looking at a very compelling study that says even without counseling and psychosocial support, medicine alone significantly reduces dependence and overdose. I don't know if you want to talk about that really briefly. You could just say that's right, but no, I'll just tell you where I'm going with that.
Whatever
so.
you say, Chief. Yeah, so there's been some compelling studies that saying in the short term, just treatment with buprenorphine alone can reduce mortality and reduce illicit opioid use. It can reduce criminal behaviors, and it can increase retention into treatment, and it can increase the likelihood of somebody going into further treatment. And then, there's other research too that says in the long term, in order to really assess the trauma and sort of the underlying reasons why people started using opioids, that counseling and other supportive services are really needed for long-term recovery. But in the short term, the study that we were looking at earlier was specifically the first 12 weeks that buprenorphine really plays a big role.
Yeah, they looked at, for example, people who are addicted to opioids at a control group and an experimental group. The experimental group got buprenorphine. Just here's buprenorphine, go away, basically. No no counseling, no job training, no nothing. They had they ended up after 12 weeks being over 70% completely opioid abstinent, just having gotten the drug. Whereas the control group was 0% opioid abstinent. They were still using. So what this means for us, kind of, why I'm bringing it up with Kayla here and during the Chiefs update, is that one of the jobs of the Burlington Police Department is to assist the city in a proper population level as far as the city and county goes response to the opioid crisis. And so one of the things we've come to see is that we want to advocate for the greater availability of the medicine. Right now, the way to get it is to enter into a spoke or a hub. There's still about a 3-week wait. Is that right? To get into a hub, even when you're a spoke, even when you want it right now. But in those 3 weeks, studies show if we just gave people the buprenorphine, started dosing them on it, it would have good effects immediately. So we're exploring, the prelude, the preview is that we're exploring ways to get buprenorphine administered out of the needle exchange. Go ahead.
Isn't it kind of, I've read and heard people testify that it's, they have to be careful the way it's prescribed, rather than just.
In what way?
If people take too much of it, for instance.
That's methadone really is susceptible to that. It's very hard to overdose. You can't I want to see anything's possible. I'm sure they'll find some scientific. It's virtually impossible to overdose on buprenorphine.
Not overdose, but become disconnected from reality.
I don't know if that's the case so much with
Methadone you can overdose on.
Right. I mean, buprenorphine. So the idea is, if especially if you're taking it with benzos, buprenorphine does have a suppressant effect. It's a partial agonist, so it behaves partially like an opioid. But the proposition, though, is that the danger of fatal overdose is practically zero on it. So it's not to as Kayla was alluding to, it's not about long-term recovery. It's about stabilizing a population and reducing mortality and reducing overdose probability. And for most people, they don't overdose on it, or they don't take an excessive dose. They can return to work. They can reorder their priorities. And there's a new technology. There's a new FDA-approved drug. It's $1,000 a shot, so we can't afford it. But it's 30 days of buprenorphine in your arm. So it's dosed to your needs in your arm. You can't divert it or sell it on the black market. You don't have to come back and get a new prescription. It's just there for 30 days. That will be a game changer, everybody says. But right now it's $1,000 a shot, so it's a wealthy person's option. So that's kind of where we're going conceptually with opioids, is towards the medicine. Abstinence works 10% of the time. Like just saying, go find Jesus doesn't work. So we're exploring that, and we have research partners who are interested in at least helping us along a little bit, like folks at Johns Hopkins. Like if you need, without having a grant in place, if you need some technical assistance, just getting a program like this set up, we'd be happy to help. So that's kind of where does that sound right?
Yeah, and the UVM Medical Center in the emergency room, they're doing a trial study that's going to be beginning in May, where they're going to randomly select people who are coming in with overdose and getting them started on a 3-day prescription of buprenorphine with a follow-up assessment within 24 hours. So the idea would be that, some people would get buprenorphine the day that they're presenting in the emergency room with an overdose, and then the next day they would be assessed for treatment. So that hopefully will go well. We'll see how it plays out during their trial period. But I think they're looking to get at least 30 people enrolled, and then they'll conclude the study after that. If it goes well, they'll be prolonging that, and I think that'll become the standard of care. So we'll see how that all goes, but they do have some plans in place. I know Dr. Brooklyn is working on, if somebody says, great, I want to go into treatment, and they're ready to go in after that, the hospital is going to find a way to make sure they're getting buprenorphine, like before they get into the hub, for example, in 3 weeks and stuff. So they're trying to fill in some of those gaps, and there's a lot of moving pieces. So hopefully,
Yeah, and
this
getting
pilot will
opioids, I'm sorry,
get it
Kayla,
going.
to
no.
highlight what you're saying, getting opioids at the emergency department, that pilot, if you ask the doctors who implemented it, it's a result of community stat. We ask them for data every month of what happens when you show up at the emergency department, and the number one outcome of showing up with an overdose, I mean, after reversal, the number one follow-up is nothing. It's like 90% of the time, it's just, hey, you're still addicted, you got some naloxone, you're alive, go home. And then the second most frequent outcome is you die in the ER. So after showing that for months and months, the doctors were like, listen, we got to do something. Those are neither of those outcomes is optimal. So they're starting this pilot where you get buprenorphine at the ER 3 days, but and I presume they'll make you take the first one there if you want to do it. And then you get an appointment with a psychiatrist to get into treatment. So that's some of the work. I know we talk a lot about other things in policing, but this is we don't have a health department in the city. So it's no secret the city relies on the police department to help out with this, and we've been diving headlong into it. So
what's the wait for the psychiatric appointment?
Well, the hospital intends to give you a psychiatric appointment within 72 hours, last I heard.
Yeah, and I just heard this morning, actually, too, that Valley Vista has funding to do telemedicine assessments. So they're going to be rolling that out, too, in the next couple months, so that they'll be able to do kind of on-demand teleassessments from physicians. So hopefully, that'll go well, and they'll be able to expand that statewide, too, in the coming months. But that is something that I know, like, we're working on, too, at the Chittenden County Opioid Alliance. We have a treatment access and recovery support services action team, and just getting, I think number one priority was reducing the wait list, which we've done, which is great. So now kind of where we're moving with that is getting treatment on demand and reducing the wait time to appointments. So that is something that's on the radar, and a need area that we've identified already is faster assessments, more trained people to do assessments, and at more avenues, and then more people who have kind of a navigator role, who know how to navigate the system, know how to complete the assessments, and then really work to get you into care, similar to what Jackie's doing. And then they have somebody at Safe Recovery as well who does this. So we're working to increase capacity.
Yeah, good summary. I'm sure I'll remember. Oh, no, there is 72-hour appointment with a psychiatrist in the hospital. It's still about a 3-week wait. They don't call it a waiting list. There's, I think, a sleight of hand going on that we're trying to get to the bottom of. But if you went right now to any place that refers you to treatment, they would give you an appointment immediately for about 3 weeks from now. So you're not waiting for the appointment, but you're waiting to go to the appointment. So there's a definitional problem here, but we're going to get to the bottom of that. Someone's going to say something.
You had talked about a new program where someone from the department and someone from the fire emergency were going out to houses.
Yeah, that's happened about 3 times the last time we did it. So that's not uncommon for our overdose numbers go up and down. And we had in the summer, we had a month where there was only 1 or 2 overdoses the entire month. So we've had 3 since that started. One, the person was very lukewarm. The other one, we knocked on the door. I know of 2. And one of the most invidious burglars in Burlington dove out the back window. Not even the person who overdosed. It was remember that? I don't know if Mike, Sean Foster. Can you tell them? This is Mike Warren. He's the Detective Bureau Lieutenant, and he will be the training and administration officer starting in April. So he has some business tonight, but if it's his first meeting. It's your first meeting, right? So anyway, so Mike, so we knocked on the door. Hey, we want to help the guy who overdosed. And then Sean Foster dives out the back window. So
Sean Foster is somebody who's currently for
Used to rip ATMs out of walls throughout the county, yeah.
Significant damage to one of the Burlington city buildings down the waterfront. So we really.
Did he violate his conditions when he dove out the window?
I'm sorry?
Was he under 24-hour curfew?
No.
Because I was just say, the second he broke the plane of the window, he'd be violating conditions of
Actually, I don't
release.
think he really- He's out on conditions, but I don't think he has any conditions that are anything other than don't commit a crime.
So,
That's quite a condition.
no, but you could, I mean, you had data on him. Every time he gets out, he just goes right back to committing burglaries. So, it's vexing. So the point is that we've only had 2 or 3, but maybe just 2 of these responses. And that person, she's called us back and said, yeah, thank you for leaving this stuff. I know I wasn't around, but I heard my friends dove out the window. So,
Is that something you select depending on the nature of the?
no, if you overdose, we go. We just got, most people apparently reverse overdoses themselves with Narcan, or they go direct to the hospital. We only get involved when there's a police call of an overdose, and we know that it happened. And there's only been 2, maybe 3, but probably just 2 since then.
Would it just be police, or would it also be the EM?
No. So there's fire department, Chief Lacos, Chief Burke, and Jackie, the opioid policy coordinator. Very mixed results so far, to be candid. Not a bad thing, but it's not like we've saved anyone because of it. I know you're probably good to go. I don't mean
Okay.
to. Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
working on an evaluation tool for that program as well, so that we can actually look at data in regards to the safe response team and see if it's worthwhile to do or if there are things that we can change to improve it. So,
Great,
nice
thank
to meet you all.
Thank
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mike, did you catch the guy that went out the back window?
I wasn't there. I don't think he was caught.
But he wasn't doing anything wrong. It's not a crime to dive out your back window. So to finish up with the chief's report, we took delivery of the emergency response vehicle that we spent a lot of time talking
that
about.
back?
What's that? No, this thing. It's in a secret location in the city. It's actually
Driveway.
no. I don't think it. I mean, it could. It would wreak havoc on my lawn to turn that thing around in my backyard. So it's as the head of the head of maintenance at Department of Public Works said, one way to think of it is as a big Ford F-550 pickup truck with 8 toolboxes on the back, which is an exact clinical definition of what it is. But it's a big, really well built vehicle, very, very high quality construction. Select Design did the design work on it. It looks stunning. And until we're ready to roll it out properly, no pun intended, we're going to keep it at streets undercover. Because if I parked it here or there, people would say, what the heck is that thing? And the officers aren't trained to drive it yet. It hasn't been filled with equipment yet. We haven't certified cops on the various tools. So we want to do that in a fairly organized manner, hopefully by the community barbecue, just so we can show it to the public there and have a press conference. But I took my wife to see it. I say, our baby's in the nursery, let's go visit it. So we go to DPW. But it's an exciting thing. I think it's, considering that it would take the Vermont State Police, like at least, how long would you say it would take the tactical team to get to Burlington? Like an hour?
At least an hour minimum.
And they have a very force-oriented approach. We don't want to wait that long, and we want to be able to make sure that the police work is done in a way that we can abide by. So this thing, even if it's just sitting there in the lot, which is not our intention, and we'd like it to be out rolling, it would take a few minutes to get all of this good equipment to the scene, and cops who know how to use it. So hopefully that'll be good for crisis outcomes. But that's happening.
So this will only go out into a call for a crisis? It's not.
No, I want it to be out on because so we're dealing always with the staffing issue. So this truck can be driven. I mean, it's not this. It's a long line. I mean, it's a really durable chassis. So what I don't want is for the truck to always be at the precinct, at the station house, and then cops have to get to the scene, see it's a crisis, and then get back in their cars and go get the truck and bring the truck back. I worry that things will unfold pretty quickly, and I worry that they'll just be biased towards, let's just solve it with what we have. So when we have adequate staffing, which should be, I'm just making up a number, but it's about like half the time or 2/3 of the time, I'd like officers to be on patrol in the truck so they can handle police business. But if it's not a full-size fire apparatus, I mean, it's bigger than an ambulance, but it's smaller than a fire truck. And when I say bigger than an ambulance, not much bigger, it's just a bit longer. I think like for argument's sake, the box on the back of the ambulance is about the same size as the cargo body, but unlike an ambulance, there's 4 doors instead of 2, just to give you like a visual. You'll see it soon enough. So then if it's out there going, the cops are there with it and they bring it with them to the emergency. I mean, that's the model in many larger cities, and I want to see the extent to which we can have that model here.
So this thing, we can expect to see being just driven around,
Right.
not
Right.
just responding to emergency.
Right. So I mean, yes, that's right. With the expectation that the equipment's all there on the roll, right? There's been more than one occasion where cops could have benefited from equipment, and it either took a while to get there, or they said, I don't have it with me, so let's just try to solve
So
that.
people drive, the officers that are driving it though, I mean, are they engaged in what they otherwise would be engaged in if this vehicle wasn't here?
Yeah,
or
the
was
one
this-
thing they can't engage in pursuits with the vehicle, and when they has lights and sirens, they can't barrel to an incident, but they can still do police work in it. Yeah, there are regular patrol officers, but they've received training on the equipment and in the truck, and also the plan is for them to also have crisis negotiation and hostage negotiation training as well. So it's about knowing how to operate the truck, maintain the equipment, use the equipment, and be trained in de-escalation. We solicited volunteers, and I think about 30, so about over half of our patrol force requested to be qualified to drive the vehicle. Not just drive it, but to be a person who can do it. And it's not a SWAT. I mean, there is like their helmets in the back. We discussed this, but it's not the whole thing is as far as lethal weapons go, I mean, there'll be the same. There maybe be 2 additional firearms on the truck, more than what 2 cops in a cruiser would have now. Like they'd have a sidearm and a rifle. Here we'd have a sidearm, a rifle, and a shotgun. So it's not for each. So it's not like a weapons platform, and it's not armored, and you can't fight from it. I mean, are you worried that? Is there a concern about it being used like on the roll?
Well, we all talked about it,
Yeah.
early on about what it was going to look like and
Yeah.
what the impression in the community was going to be. And I guess I was under the impression that it would be more used in moments where it was needed and not day-to-day driving around town as part of like just another cruiser, except it's this, rather larger
Right.
vehicle. But now I'm hearing that may not be the case.
No, I mean, I'm sorry if that was. I
I'm
think
just
I've
telling
been,
you what I recall. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not saying
I've been
misled us or
clear
anything.
that the intent when we have adequate staffing is to always have it on the road, and that's just to minimize, to number one, create the expectation that it be used, to make sure that it gets there in time to use it, and to make sure officers understand that this is equipment that should be brought to the scene immediately, and to not have to have them, like, they could create a perimeter because there's a barricaded suspect, and then 2 officers say, I have to leave this perimeter and go back and get the truck and then come back here. That may be the case if we're short-staffed, but if we have enough people to just have the truck to begin with, I'd like them to bring it with them to the crisis rather than have to go back and get it. Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like we gotta, I mean, if you introduce it as such, and, everybody understands that, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, no, and one of the
Public,
things,
And then you're gonna bring it out to the.
they'll be able to see what's in it, right?
Right.
There's no like, oh, we can't open this, and if you open it, there's like grenades and a rocket launcher in it. There's no, it's power tools
Right.
and ballistic shields and, when we talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that we were, including yourself, was sensitive to how the community
Yeah.
was going to respond to this. So I think the more visible it is on a day-to-day basis, may translate into it being more acceptable, or it may want.
No, right.
generate
So
more
it could be
concern.
this idea that folks get used to it. But what I feel about this is that, people demand like rapid and effective de-escalation and isolation and containment. And that's not just verbal. That requires that the cities with adequate budget to feel like a real de-escalation program and isolation and containment for mentally ill people and barricaded people in crisis, fugitives and suspects and all that, like, have these apparatus and they have them deployed quickly on the road. They drive around in them. And the driving around part notwithstanding, what I'm trying to say is that when to meet these demands, we have this equipment, and I find it incongruous that Burlington would say we demand this, and this, and this, but then when professionals bring that about, we don't want to see what it looks like, right?
I don't think it's a matter of not seeing what it looks like. It's just, I think it's more a question of what its function was, and I guess
Right.
I had the impression that it was meant to be something that could go and serve the safety of officers
Right,
at
right.
crises, and that it was not gonna be just another vehicle to drive around town in, sort of, and do your normal policing work. And it sounds like that's, assuming there's adequate staffing.
saying the way that- yeah.
Instead of two officers, say, or an officer being in a cruiser driving around, he or she will now be in this larger vehicle driving around.
Right.
And that makes it a much more visible object. I mean, I think
Sure.
if there's a crisis in the north end and people see this vehicle there and people pulling equipment out of it, I mean, that makes complete sense.
Right.
If they're just seeing it drive through their neighborhood, they may start to wonder, well, what have we become if this is the norm? And I guess I
Right.
didn't understand that it was gonna be more.
But what have we become?
Well, I mean, it would appear to, and I haven't seen it yet.
Right.
And that's why we were concerned about the size of it, but
We've
it's just
become
not
a
a
city
cruiser.
that
It's not a
has-
cruiser, it's a much larger police vehicle, and I don't know what people will view of it, that's one of our concerns.
There'll be a lot of different things people will view of it, but, I mean, I'm saying we become a city that has isolation and containment and negotiation and less than lethal equipment like constantly available in a durable platform that'll last for a decade. Like, that's the city we've become. And, bear in mind, like, I severed our relationship with the Department of Defense because I don't believe in the over-militarization of policing. But I also don't believe, and I'm not saying you said this, I'm maybe talking about people who are harsher critics, that there's something like de-escalation dust that we just sprinkle on things. Like we do a physical job where seconds count. I mean, the reason, we acknowledge that seconds count in this and that expectations count and having the equipment there immediately matters. And so I guess I'm trying to split that. I'm looking at the best practice, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is having this on the roll with the level of staffing that we have. And it would stay at the station house in cases where we just didn't have enough staffing to meet like a minimum cruiser patrol requirement and put it out because it requires 2 cops. So if you had like 5 cops working that night, I wouldn't have like 2 in this thing and then another 3 for the whole city. But if you have 7 or 8 or 9 cops, it would make sense. And so we'll have to see. I mean, I'm not insensitive to your concerns because they're real. I just think we need to at least give the community an opportunity to understand what the vehicle is and what it represents and why we have it, and let them, react to that and express opinions, right?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to me the key is getting that out there, letting people see it and see what it's for.
Yeah.
And it's not an offensive vehicle.
No, that's right. There's no, I mean, it's not like well, you'll see it. I mean, it's not like a Bearcat or we have pictures of it. I can show you another picture. We have the actual pictures of the actual vehicle. So,
Anything else on the chief's report?
Truck, cars. No, there's another, a statewide, people who are afraid of police power and think it's abused are gonna see a big police thing and worry that it's gonna somehow infringe upon their rights. Like, it's just it's a writ large, it highlights attention in America, right?
I mean, again, I guess I'm reacting only because
Oh, no, I
it's
know,
different
I'm
from
not-
what I expect,
yeah.
what I guess I understood it was going to be used more on a case-by-case need as opposed to becoming another sort of
Right.
patrol vehicle, another patrol vehicle that we were going to use more or less on a daily basis. I did not understand that, I guess, when we first talked about it. But that, that's just the way I understood it. I'm not
Here, it's
suggesting-
foreshortened because it's,
suggesting that
I gotta
there's
get,
any,
I gotta get further away from it. No, I'm not saying I understand the concern that you're representing. I mean, it's a valid concern.
How often would you say that, just since we're
Yeah.
we're getting better with our numbers, would you say that an incident occurs in this city on some, historical basis in which we would want that vehicle present?
I think twice a month. I think there's cases where there's a burglary with an open door and you don't want to put an officer in there. You want to put a robot in. We had a barricaded,
Thank you.
once every 3 to 5 weeks, we get somebody, barricaded in a location. And then we've also, a few times a year, we get called to help folks in other jurisdictions as well, so.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other concerns like, are we using too much gas, putting too much wear and tear on the platform? But again, I'm curious to see, I want to come to an understanding of how reasonable it is to say we're going to not. So for me, it's clear that getting it there quickly is better. So the question is, do I want to get it there slowly, or with more time when we don't have to, because having it out there would offend some sensibilities, and in a way that that is reasonable, that's a genuine, like if it's just the people who always harbor these feelings, no matter what, now they're seeing it and they're harboring it against this vehicle, that's less of a concern for me, to be candid. But if it's people who were undecided or on the fence or neutral, and then all of a sudden the vehicle tips them into trusting the police less, that's more of a concern, I guess.
Yeah, I don't mean to overstate, I just.
No, it's-
Just raising, I think, a concern that's gonna come up in the general.
Yeah, I don't like seeing it. It's too
I
big
mean,
and the police scare
I
me.
suppose there will be a procedure or a process by which, I mean, the truck will not do certain things, like if there's, if I'm driving down Pine Street and I'm going 20 miles an hour over the speed limit,
Yeah.
am I gonna get pulled over and look back and see this large vehicle that's gonna be somewhat more intimidating than police already are?
I hope not. I mean, I don't want the car to get in.
I mean, I just wonder
Yeah.
what it's, the role that it will be used in, other than its primary role, which is to support
Right.
these difficult moments that we have once or twice.
No, that's
in
fair
a
to say. That's the purview of the commission. So I'd like to have that conversation. That's a worthwhile conversation. Because right, we don't want it engaging in pursuits, and we don't want it going to certain like very low stakes routine calls where it would, like you said, I mean, if it did a car stop, it would block traffic. So
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we'll develop a procedure for its
yeah,
use? Or
no,
something?
of course, that's right. No, and thank you. That's a valid point. It's important to bring up. On the heels of that, that pretty much covers everything. I was just going to say, Stephanie Seguino, the UVM economics professor, released a statewide car stop data study just this evening. It doesn't break out the Burlington Police Department. It does acknowledge that us and the state police are more proactive when it comes to dealing with disparity. But I just anticipate, in light of her statewide analysis, that we'll get press inquiries that will ask us to look at Burlington-only analyses, and we're ready to talk about a bunch of those. Not necessarily, I mean, we can at this meeting, but between this meeting and the next, I think this will be in the press, and we'll have some results to report. The most important of which is that we did 2017 analyses as well. For 2016 and 2017, the results of our searches, when we do decide to search a vehicle, don't vary across race. We get about 80% contraband. We get contraband about 80% of the time when we search a car, regardless of the race of the driver, which used to be quite disparate and is an indication of bias. And I know I said that we closed that gap in 2016. We got the 2017 numbers. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that, Eric.
So, Eric Fowler, our prior BPD data analyst, was finishing up an analysis of 2016 before he left. So that's not a complete product, but looking at those initial numbers, I guess to talk about contraband found in searches when we decided to search a car. A lot of talk around indicators of bias in policing, hone in on when an officer gets next to the driver and is able to determine the race of the driver as they perceive it. And they, look at what's going on with the car, and they make a decision: is a crime being committed here? Is there evidence of a crime? And they make the decision whether or not to search the car. Is that decision informed by a bias, or is that decision informed by the actual evidence as it presents itself on a street side? So whether they have a successful search and unsuccessful search with different races, the argument is that that can show maybe they're using things other than just the evidence to make those decisions. For instance, if you look at some of our earlier traffic race data, we were less successful searching black drivers than we were with white drivers. And so what that was hinting at was that we might be either applying a higher standard of what we think might be criminal behavior to white drivers than we are to black drivers, or possibly we had a lower standard for black drivers. Again, this is, you can't get an officer's head, but you can look at what's downstream of that search. So Moving from that into 2016, we actually saw that kind of flip-flop where we had contraband found 70% of the time when we searched white motorists and 74% of the time when we searched black motorists.
That wasn't statistically significant, but it is a flip.
Yeah, the good news is that it's, well, it might not be statistically significant, it's much more level, and it's level in a direction that.
Right, in 2017, I don't know if you said it, we had 80%.
Yeah,
so.
sorry, I haven't got 17. Yeah, so looking at preliminary data for 2017, it's pretty much 80% across the board.
Yeah, and that's 2 years running now, so it's not the new way, it's not a permanent thing, but it's not like a year or a blip, it's 2 years of searches. And in Stephanie's report, which I was reading tonight, just got released, she calls this type of disparate outcome the gold standard of an indication of bias. And so I'm not saying we just attacked it to like deprive people of the gold standard. I think I agree with her that it is an important indication, and we really talked to officers about what it meant. And I think we really carefully over the last few years walked officers through the intuitive appeal of this measure. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's the one you can niggle about what drivers are on the road, in-state, out-of-state, how many black drivers are really on the road. But when you know the race of the driver and he or she stopped in front of you and you search them or not, it's like a very unambiguous outcome. So I think it's promising. There's still other disparities, but by way of the chief's update, this may come to light in the next few weeks, again, as a topic of discussion. That's all I got.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
I don't know, Chief, if this is the appropriate time to ask about the regional dispatch update, is that?
Sure.
We could do it during commissioner question, or maybe if you had any information.
So regional dispatch passed. So what that means is that every town in the county except for Shelburne will become part of a regional authority with the task of forming a plan and executing that plan to bring about regional dispatch. Does that make sense? So it's not that people can still opt out. Nothing set in stone, but there is now a regional authority that will move towards regional dispatch. I'm meeting with our dispatchers privately tomorrow. Their concern is that that they weren't included in the process up to this point at all, and the advice of the consultant was that, and the attorneys who advised the city were that this was that discussing the terms of work at that point would in effect be a labor negotiation that the city wasn't authorized to have. It's still, to be candid, it really alienated the dispatchers, and they worry about their pay and their benefits and their job security. Some of them, I think, just don't want change. Others have very legitimate procedural questions about how it would work. So ultimately, the fire chief is the person responsible for the program. He's the basically the program manager, the project manager. But nonetheless, the dispatchers work for this police department, and I've been meeting with a few of them personally, privately, but I'm meeting with all of them in this room tomorrow. Well, anyone who wants to come to make sure that going forward, now that the regional authority's in place, and it's a weird thing, right? If they're working with the regional authority, then it's not a labor negotiation because they don't have power to conduct a labor negotiation with the dispatchers. It's like policy and planning. But if they were to have that very same conversation with Steve Locke as a representative of the city, then it's a de facto labor negotiation. So I just want to make sure that they have the right voice in this process going forward, because ultimately they'll know how to make it work. And I don't want them to just throw sand in the motor because they're afraid of change. I want them to make a dispatch system that keeps cops safer than the present one, gets us there faster, gets fire resources there faster, and it's a fair, good place for dispatchers to work in. That's where we are, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So an update on the community barbecue?
You want to give the update, Laura? Is that
Yeah,
play-
I just wanted to note that we are having it on May 16th from 4 to 7 p.m. And we're going to be having it essentially based at Pomeroy Park, but also blocking off a small section of North Street for the trucks, et cetera. So we're starting to work on building partnership sponsors and that kind of thing. So I just put out an event on Facebook, so we welcome your attendance as well as any ideas on people that would like to participate. We'll have lots of people with tables and lots of kids' activities and such. So.
Yeah, it should be great. We're keeping it on North Street, just a little bit further east. This time, we looked at a lot of different, Laura very assiduously looked at all sorts of locations. I really like the feel of having it in the street and in a fairly narrow street, just so it feels like this, like a festival. You feel like, wow, I'm in the street. This is not something I normally do. We have it in a park. It was good last year. It just felt diffuse. So, and you know, that area in the Old North End does benefit from police outreach. So we're having it by Pomeroy Park, as Laura said.
Additionally, keeping in mind disruptions to traffic flow and that kind of thing, we want to keep that in mind. And Pomeroy Park it's small, so it'll feel kind of like there's people in a smaller area, but with the street kind of feel. So it should be a good combination of things and hopefully disrupt traffic as little as possible.
Review of, and I know we're gonna lose a quorum at 8 PM, but we should be okay.
7:30, yeah.
Well, Neri's leaving at 8 though. Yeah, so we'll have a quorum until then. So review of incoming correspondence, you sent it to us in an email?
I wasn't sure if that's something that needs to be read every.
I don't think so, as long as you guys are getting,
Right, yeah.
I think if everyone's getting it with the minutes that Laura
I
distributes.
think there's great feedback
Yeah,
from the community.
there was great.
Just the fact that people are going out of their way to send letters and cards and emails. It's pretty amazing, showcasing and discussing.
Yeah, thank you
the
for sending that to
experience,
us. I think it's good to get.
that they have with officers and their contributions. So we get them often, and I just think it's worth noting, and hopefully you have a chance to read them, so.
And I'm gonna channel Christine, and she would ask if you've set up a system on the website to do compliments.
Oh, great question. I was just talking about that with Robert Appel today. Not that he thought compliments were necessary. We were just bringing this up academically. We have not made any progress on that, but one of the reasons why is we didn't have an analyst, not Kayla, but Nancy Stetson, who you'll meet next time, hopefully, is a person who can do that. So, and she just started about 2 weeks ago.
So update on the process involving officer complaints. I think there were two commissioners last month who hadn't yet checked in with the chief on complaints. Is anyone here? This is the last meeting who followed up on their complaints?
You did.
I did, yeah.
You did? Okay, so, any feedback on that process?
No, I think everything, the way they do it, the way they handle the complaints and follow up with the person, doing the complaint if they want to follow up
Yep.
with that person or give them feedback. I think everything worked out really well with them. Some of the ones that I had, they didn't want any feedback or to follow
Right.
up with, but
Right.
most of them did, yeah.
Okay. Are there any new complaints that we should be circulating?
No, I'll check. Chief Wright needed to take the day off, but she handles that. And
Okay.
she gives me a heads up on any complaint of note, and we haven't gotten any. If it's anything, like we got somebody complaining that we weren't responding to traffic tickets that were submitted, traffic conditions, parking conditions submitted to C-Click-Fix on weekends. But that's because we don't monitor C-Click-Fix on the weekends, like as policy. But no, so I wish I had a more certain answer for you, but this is my answer. Like whenever there's a serious allegation, I get notified, and no one's notified me of anything serious since the last meeting. It doesn't mean that there's no complaints, but Chief Wright's not here. I apologize. By way of complaints, there's Charles Winkleman is a local progressive leader. He ran for city council. I met with him. One of his worries is that folks don't trust the police enough to come and make certain complaints. They don't trust that if we make them by online, that will follow up. So one of the things I'd like to propose to him, I don't know if someone here would actually physically want to be a volunteer. He represents certain constituencies in the LGBTQ community, as well as just, the Progressive Caucus generally. If anybody would want to, from the commission, just say to reach out to Mr. Winkleman and say, if you know someone who wants to make a complaint, you can let us know about, Nairi, you could say, let me know about it, I'll walk you through, you put it online, I'll make sure the chief accounts for it. We are serious, I believe cops do good work, so I think we should be open about this, and if they're doing bad work, I want to know, right? So his concern was that some folks, especially transgender folks, just don't trust the process at all, and if that's true, and there's misconduct out there, I want them to come forward, so maybe by having a non-police bridge in the form of a commissioner would be helpful. I don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to do that.
Well, yeah, I'll volunteer Christine. being honest, I'll check with her, but she's really good at that. I mean,
Yes.
She talks about it every month.
Right.
So I'd like to have her do that because I think she's got such a good way of welcoming feedback.
Right.
So unless there's anyone here who wants to, I can check with her.
Yeah, I check, because she's so busy sometimes. that-
She is busy, but she's also so willing to do things like this.
And it could be, it could be more than one person.
All right, I'll check with her and get back to
Yeah.
you. Any updates from commissioners, comments?
I had a question. Did I understand Chief Burke is he,
He's been.
Chief Burke was selected
Moving
in
on.
like this really weird process. He was selected to, sorry, South Burlington. He was selected to be the chief of the South Burlington Police Department. Now, starting in July as a deputy chief and then becoming the actual chief next January. So he's got, like 4 months to stew and then 6 months to apprentice, and then he'll be the chief. But, I mean, I felt like I take a little credit for mentorship. I found him to be a great deputy chief of police and one of my right-hand people in a big way, and I'm proud of him. I wish he'd stay. I love working with him, and I think he does a great job. But, hey, I left my police department to be a chief, so I get it. Yeah. And he'll be right across the street. There's this conspiracy that we're just going to form one big police department, which wouldn't be the worst thing, but there's no plan for that. Don't worry. So, yes, you heard correctly.
so just, I'm sorry to see him go, frankly.
Yeah, no, me too. He's great.
Happy for him that he's found that.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. So review of Directive 14.2, and that came out as well from Laura. Digital imaging, audio, and video.
You all have a copy of the
Does everyone have a copy?
update? Okay. We also have copies of the original directive as it went way back, so I'm not sure, because this is my first meeting, I'm not sure how much you are all aware of the directive and how it played out. But originally, Directive DD14 encompassed both the digital image and audio and video, and it had the body-worn camera all together as one directive. And the folks that were looking at the body-worn camera directive decided that there needed to be some separation between the two, because the body-worn camera directive was most likely going to have to be revisited on a very regular basis, just due to legislative changes and other policy changes that may happen, whereas the digital image, audio, and video section is most likely not going to be, so felt that needed to kind of have a standalone directive. So the body-worn camera directive, I think you folks, it was February 20th that you reviewed and adopted that as a standalone directive, which is now DD 14.1. So it's its own standalone. And then DD 14.2 is now titled Digital Imaging, Audio, and Video Other Than Body-Worn Camera. And that may be the one that you folks have a copy of. And basically, it's all the same information that was contained within DD 14 as it relates to taking photographs, taking audio recorded statements from individuals during investigations. There are some subtle changes, some things that really didn't apply now that we have digital photos rather than making copies of actual photographs, things like that, but very subtle changes. We also took out the portion that talked about mugshots. Mugshots is actually referred to in another directive we have. It is,
It's Directive 6.
yeah, Directive 6. I'm
Which
sorry.
talks about investigations, arrests, and procedures downstream of arrests.
Yeah, DD6. So I think the plan is eventually there's going to be a new directive that talks about procedures involving arrests, so arrest processing procedures, and mugshots will actually probably be encompassed within that directive, but that's a directive that will happen in the future. The mugshot section is currently covered in DD6, so it is still referenced, but that was removed from this. The other parts that were removed from this, the 35 millimeter stuff that I already spoken about. So most of it has already been reviewed in the original DD14 that you have all looked at, I think, previously, so there aren't any significant changes to that.
So when would that have been?
The original DD
It's,
14.
February of 13 was when
Okay.
that earlier version, yeah.
Okay, so we personally wouldn't necessarily have seen
I've
this.
seen that.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
something, yeah, I mean, that was in January of 13 that the commission looked at that.
Okay. So this is already in effect, though?
It is in effect because my understanding, and maybe Eric can speak to this a little bit, it hasn't changed at all from what we had been operating under this entire time. And because they had pulled the part out about the body-worn camera, I think they felt that it was appropriate to just continue using it under the new directive, but then have the police commission review it at the next meeting. So I don't know if maybe you can add to that.
Yeah, the only change, I mean, there was a little bit of removal of stuff that was A, redundant, or B, kind of outdated, which the lieutenant just spoke about. But the only thing really that actually changes officers' actions is just, and this is something we've been doing in practice already, was as you started rolling out the body cameras, officers would take sworn statements on scene. Before the body cameras, they'd hold out an audio recorder to get the sworn statement. Officers started to default to using their body camera to capture that sworn statement, but then when the detectives would follow up on those higher level crimes, they wouldn't have immediate access to the body camera footage. And so what was happening was some of these important interviews were getting lost for a period of time before they're available for that investigation. So we've already started to direct our officers to during, to use the audio recorder. So this just puts that in words on paper. So aside from that, there's no real change. Their words without permission. But, if we're, talking to someone in the building or something like that, we can turn it on and record it.
I couldn't think of and I'm sure you can tell me one, but I couldn't think of a situation where it wouldn't be a good idea to record speaking with a witness. And so apparently that's what you do.
Well, so let's have for instance, there's a non-sworn statement, and that's something that, we talk about here. It's just, hey, what happened today? If we want, we can turn that audio recorder, and it's easy for us to go back and listen to that.
Sure.
Maybe it's a car crash, maybe it's, or a lower level incident where we're not actually taking a sworn statement. Those things come up, and they're handy because.
I would think so. Yeah, that's
The review
my only
also.
question. Yeah.
Any other questions about that? I don't know if you folks had enough time to review it before you came tonight or when you were provided copies of that.
Is there any significance to the couple of highlighted areas that are darkened? Is those additions, there's one under section 5 on the second page, and then the very last item?
Manipulation.
I just wanna-
Yeah, I think it's just driving home the point that if we have evidence, we're not altering the evidence itself, we're going to make a copy of it. I think that's something that if someone was doing something the first time, maybe they'd make a mistake there. And while it might be an innocent mistake, we would be destroying evidence.
In the case of
And
public records requests, oftentimes we have to redact audio statements, so it's just making it clear that we must be making those redactions from not an original audio recording, but from a copy. So there are many times where we may want to The court may ask us to take just a portion of an audio and send that to them, and we may just take a clip out of a long recording and send that. And so it speaks to that.
And then the other one, when we're investigating a homicide or a sexual assault, that's the other part that's bolded. I mean, there's some law, that's cited there that gives direction on that. It's an important thing. We don't want to blow a homicide case. Another instance in our directives, we will not fire warning shots. That's in bold. That's another important one. We want to send bullets flying around the city. So it's something that maybe its placement is a function of the natural flow of the document, but the bold is saying, hey, this is important.
Okay.
Don't mess this up. Yeah.
Do you feel like you've had an opportunity to look at it and ask questions? So do you need us to approve it?
Well, I think we're looking to have the commission approve and sign off, although it is, it is something that has been in place since the BWC, the body worn camera directive was put in place on the 20th, so we have been operating under that, but I think just for formality, we're looking for the approval of commission.
Make a motion, we approve it as written.
I'll second.
Second? Great, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to go back to Commissioner's update comments. I was able to attend the Queen City Police Foundation luncheon. Did anyone else make it? It was fantastic. It was I brought some people from my office who haven't been before. I've been before, and I just...
The awards luncheon?
The what?
The awards luncheon recently, yeah.
That was excellent. So I just wanted to say that during comment period that it's just a really nice event to see Burlington police officers recognized, and it was nice.
Great,
Yeah.
Last year, I remember.
Yeah.
And Laura did a great job planning it.
It
so.
was fantastic. It's a really,
Put that in the
people were very
minutes.
nice.
Yeah.
Glad people
Thank you.
appreciated it.
Okay, I don't think we can talk about item number 9, update on police commission meeting, encouraging attendance, because I think that is Deputy Chief Burke and Christine. I think they're working on that.
One
Update,
thing related, excuse me, I'm sorry if you want to.
sorry for keeping you up.
No, it's not you. One thing related, just, we talked about encouraging attendance through special topics.
Right.
We had a briefing on UVM's drone program here, where they use drones to do things like searches or respond to fires, for example.
Is it an academic?
University of Vermont, the Geospatial Analysis
Oh, right, with
Department.
oh,
Jarlath O'Neill Dunn,
Yeah.
right.
yeah, he's fantastic. Okay.
So we've been reading about cases in which drones are used to make observations about a person in crisis, again, without having to put police officers in a scene. Not conduct surveillance per se, but a case that was really compelling was a woman was in her car, she was suicidal, and she was parked next to a guy in a tractor trailer, and he was afraid to leave because she was waving a gun around, and the police didn't want to get too close, so they just monitored her with a drone until they realized she was like literally falling asleep or going unconscious, and then they rescued the guy and moved in. And we don't feel like, drones are very, very sensitive, and in fact, so the irony is that any regular person, so to speak, can just do anything they want basically with a drone, but if you're government, you have a lot of regulations, and then there's the suspicion of what's government going to do with it. It's are they going to do surveillance? Are they going to invade people's privacy? But we're interested in pursuing, maybe as needed, having an MOU with UVM, that if there's a crisis, we're looking for a missing child, or there's a critical incident, we could subcontract their services, which I think is a good way. They're not going to come out and help us do surveillance on people's second-story windows as part of an MOU or something. But before going any further, you'll see where this comes into number 9. I wanted them to actually brief the commission and the public on the use of drones in Burlington by them, and what they've done with the state police and with the state government. And then at least it would broach the topic. It would level set that we could have a discussion about what's appropriate for our city, if anything. So there's no plans right now to just acquire our own drones. But I'd hate to think that if there's someone missing in one of our parks or in a forested area, or if there's literally, we're looking for somebody off the shore, that we couldn't deploy something owned by UVM to help look for them. So that's kind of.
So maybe have Jarlath come in sometime?
Yeah, that would get a lot of attendance. If I said there's going to be a commission meeting on drones, I think
Yep.
we'd get a lot of people.
Okay, so I wonder if we should put that It would be good if we don't lose sight of that for a future meeting.
Yeah, we were talking about doing that sooner rather than later.
Right, would June be a good time? I don't know if we have.
Yeah,
other-
yeah, possibly, I mean, yeah.
I was wondering about having, if he would be interested in coming to like the barbecue and doing like a demo there. I mean, kids would love it. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's appropriate, but it might be a nice segue.
No, that's a great
Yeah, that's a
point.
great idea. And actually, if we get our act together, if we plan it for June, then we can have flyers there at the barbecue where he is, if he's able to come.
Yeah.
That say, come, you know, if you want to learn more about the, whatever. So maybe we can do that. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. It's the morning, this is, so BTV stat, starts like early, relatively early in the morning. It's just a long day and I got up early. I apologize. It's not you guys. Me.
So,
we need the drone
update
guy here.
on the vicious dog hearing.
Could I just ask one question on attendance? And this is more related to the televising piece of it. Because I remember I had been working on trying to get the
Yeah.
funding, and then, I think it was a month ago, we had CCTV here saying that they had gotten some money, and Rachel was here, and everybody was happy, and now I noticed Jim is back, and I assume Jim is here as part of the CCTV, or, okay. I didn't know if he was still back in the Peace and Justice Center doing it again, and we had lost that momentum.
When I went back to CCTV, I said, I'm glad we got funding, and they said, no, we didn't, we're just paying Jim to do it, so,
Okay.
but it's, right,
Okay.
that sounds right? Duty bound,
Okay.
duty
I
bound to
just wanted to get
silence.
the clarification on that, because
Yeah.
I know Jim was doing it, and then we had someone
Right,
else
right.
last month, and we thought
Yeah.
that it was, that they had picked it up. So they have picked it up, but,
Being paid by CCTV.
okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that.
Okay. Anything else on meetings? Vicious dog hearing, we are issuing an amended order that should be coming out any day in response to some feedback we got from the parties after the order issued. So that should be coming out. Minutes from previous commission meeting, did everyone review February's meeting?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion? Any concerns, changes? All right, do I have a motion to approve, accept? A
Second.
Great, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, thank you. Next meeting, I'm guessing is spring break. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I suspect it is. So that'll take a few of us out of the picture. I don't know, Peter, you,
I'm gonna be gone,
I'll be gone.
I'll be
Normally
gone
be
that, I'll
the
be gone that
20
final.
What's this, the
week.
24th is the normal,
Yeah,
the intended meeting?
so at least three of us are gone, and I'm not sure if Michelle, are you guys?
I'm here.
Is everyone amenable?
I'll
to
be here.
Moving it a week earlier?
Oh, excuse me,
So that would be
Tuesday the 17th?
Tuesday the 7th.
That looks like it's fine for me.
So, April 17th. Should we make that change?
Okay.
Yeah, I think that well, worked for me. Worked for
Okay.
everybody?
All right. Great, thank you for doing that. And then in terms of the agenda, we'd remove that directive, but I think it otherwise is pretty similar. Do we need an executive session?
Yeah, if you don't mind, yes.
Okay, all right. So we're a motion to go into the executive session?
I'll move.
All in
And that's,
favor?
and that's to discuss, I need to say.
Yeah, it's to discuss,
what it's for.
internal,
Yeah.
it's to discuss an
Personnel.
internal investigation.
To discuss an internal
Thank you.
investigation.
Okay. So we're going to go into executive session.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, it's,
Thank you.
now the secret society
Yeah,
meets.
it's-